I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Bob Marks.
Welcome to the game. Here we are again. Please take a moment, if you would, to subscribe. You can subscribe at YouTube or any other way you get your content, or thegamepeninsula.com. But it has been a month since the election. And so we have here Congressman Kevin Mullin to talk a little bit about, it probably took a month to digest everything that happened, because it was, I think in many ways, quite unexpected. So welcome, Kevin. Good to see you again. Before we dive into Congress and the national election, we got to talk a little bit about the ongoing crisis in the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. I know you signed a letter along with every other state and federal legislator calling for her resignation. It doesn't look like she's going to resign. Are you on board with the proposal by the County Board of Supervisors to do a charter amendment and or a recall?
Well, let me just say it's great to be with you, Mark and Bob. I'm in, I think, a better frame of mind, at least a little bit, from the last time we talked about election night. But honored to be with you, honored to be reelected in the 15th Congressional District. In terms of the sheriff's issue, you know, this has been just a really upsetting and chaotic episode here. You know, I was one of the folks, one of the early endorsers of Sheriff Corpus. I thought that the sheriff's office needed a culture change. I thought that she was a reform-minded individual. And I think certainly some attempts were made to follow through on her campaign promises, but really, you know, she has presided over a culture of chaos, as I understand it, in the sheriff's office. The report that came out with a litany of issues that were raised has given me great concern, and many others in the county in an elected position. I feel like something of a steward of the county as a senior elected official in this county. And this has been embarrassing for the county of San Mateo government in general, that it's reflected poorly on the sheriff's office. It's got a lot of attention. You know, it's either, you know, I sort of know how this is going to end. She's going to leave office at some point. The question is it through resignation? Is it through removal by the charter amendment with that sunset provision put into it, or is she recalled? What I do know of those R's, she's not going to be reelected if it gets to that point. So my hope is that she would see the wisdom in ending this episode now. And it's just truly unfortunate. I had high hopes. Look, I was an early supporter. I had high hopes that she would be a breath of fresh air for the sheriff's office. It seems as though there's been, you know, episodes of retribution. And just look, as a political practitioner in this county, I have to tell you that I was stunned at the tone in terms of the defiance that she was showing and the unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation. That was a troubling sign right from the get-go. That now she seems to suggest that it was a scheduling issue. I doubt that. If she wanted to participate in the investigation, she would have, and put all of those cards on the table and explained the various decisions that have been made, and the empowering of her chief of staff to make a series of troubling personnel decisions. I was just really surprised at the defiant tone, and there was sort of no going back from that. And here we sit at something of a stalemate, but I applaud the Board of Supervisors for the action that they've taken to force this issue and try to bring it to some conclusion so the Sheriff's Office can turn that page and move forward.
Kevin, you served in the Assembly with now Attorney General Rob Bonta. He does have a direct supervision role over sheriffs and district attorneys. Do you think that he should step into this situation?
I think the Attorney General should step in. I believe that there have been communications The report certainly was sent to the Attorney General's office. I've not had a conversation with Rob specifically about this. I'm monitoring the situation. I have been, I think, maybe making the assumption that he would intervene if this situation persists without resolution. So I'll continue to monitor it. But I think at this point, it is appropriate that the Attorney General review the matter and see where there's an opportunity to intervene. We have to move beyond this. There really is no recovery here with Christina Corpus in office. She's lost all of her political support to the extent that she had it going into office. And there's really no way for her to survive for any length of time in office. And it's time, the functions of the sheriff's office are too important to have this kind of dysfunction and really limbo right now. We have to turn the page and move forward and get back to policing and governance that is befitting the people of the County of San Mateo.
Kevin, we're talking to you on a Monday. Tomorrow, the Board of Supervisors is supposed to take the second reading on their proposal for a county charter amendment that would, in essence, allow them to hold a hearing at which they could make the judgment to fire Sheriff Corpus. Do you support that charter amendment?
I do support the charter amendment. I had some initial concerns at the initial reading that this might be abused potentially down the road in some future Board of Supervisors if there's some political conflict with an elected sheriff at that time. But with the sunset provision, as I understand it, that's been included, I'm comfortable that this is narrow enough and specific enough to this current sheriff administration, so it would be applicable to this sheriff and the many concerns that have been raised, and isn't ripe for abuse down the road. You always want to make sure that you're not creating byproducts and unintended consequences in sort of wanting to act in the short run. You don't want to box yourself in the long run. But I think the way this thing is carefully crafted and with the leadership of Ray Mueller, Noelia Corzo, who've both really taken the lead, I believe, in monitoring the situation. I'm confident that with the board's leadership, this matter will ultimately be resolved, perhaps by the voters, one way or the other.
There is a group of people who support her ouster, but are uncomfortable with the charter amendment is the way to do it, who are also moving forward with an effort to recall her. Do you also support the recall?
I'm not taking a position on that effort. It feels a bit premature. I want to see what happens at the board level with this charter amendment. Certainly a recall is there in the toolbox should it get to that point. Recalls, I believe, should be utilized rarely. I don't think it's going to get to that point. So I've not opined specifically on recall, but let me just say that if the board is not able to put a charter amendment in, she's not able to be removed by other means, I am inclined to look favorably upon that, but I don't believe it's going to get to that point. I just think recalls are being abused in the county and local office. I think the recall in Millbrae was an abuse of the recall system. I disagree strongly with it. That may run counter to public opinion in the city of Millbrae, but I was not happy with that effort. Of course, it's there for citizens to use it if necessary, but only when a certain threshold is met where individuals should not be allowed to remain in office. And I don't believe it's going to get to that point. But if it does, in fact, go the recall route, I'm inclined to look favorably upon that effort. But we're not there yet. Let's just put it that way.
Let's shift gears a little bit. JFK said victory has 1,000 fathers and defeat is an orphan. He could have been talking about this year's election for the Democrats. As you've had a little time to consider, what went wrong this year for the Democrats?
Well, unfortunately, a lot went wrong. We look for silver linings in politics. We do have a few. My colleague Adam Gray from the Assembly may be joining me in the House of Representatives. Not every single vote has been cured and counted, but it looks like he will be joining a cadre of former Assembly members, state Assembly members joining me in the House of Representatives. Some outstanding individuals. So I'm positive about that. I was certainly hopeful that we would take control of the House of Representatives. Looks like we're going to be just a couple of seats short. In terms of the national election, we were together on election night. You had that sense that it was on a razor's edge, that it could not have been tighter, that those swing states were going to swing literally one way or the other. And they swung toward former President Trump. So look, this was a terrible setup, right? In retrospect, it was pretty audacious, I think, that President Biden was going to ask for another 4 years at age 82. It's hard to imagine him serving in office at 84, 85 years old. So he probably never should have pursued re-election. He should have been that bridge to a new generation of Democrats. And I supported all that the president did in his time in office: the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, the infrastructure bill. He did some really remarkable things as a president. And it is just deeply unfortunate that we are at this point. I think 107 days for Kamala Harris to mount a campaign when she wasn't very well known, really, as the vice president. And that is another issue. We talked about this actually on a previous show, that I think she was underutilized as the vice president. She's a powerful communicator. And I think she was underutilized in that role as vice president. But the so-called switch, the candidate switch, happened late in the cycle. It was just a very difficult setup for her to overcome. And then, the right track, wrong track numbers, as effective as President Biden was legislatively, he really, the presidents get blamed for the economy. And even though the macro numbers of the economy were strong, people were feeling it in the pocketbook with inflation every time they went to the grocery store, paying more. Just the affordability challenges that people were feeling, and there was this sort of view of the Trump administration that somehow the economy was better at that time. And I think that was a little bit of a misread in terms of if you look at the overall record of the Trump 1.0 versus the Biden administration, that Joe Biden got us through the pandemic and an economy that was gradually recovering. People weren't feeling it. So the right track, wrong track number was, if you sort of, you can get lost in all the data and this swing state, that swing state. Right track, wrong track, over 70% of voters thought the country was on the wrong track. So it's very difficult if you are part of the incumbent administration when 7 out of 10 people feel the country's on the wrong track. There were just too many headwinds there for Kamala Harris to overcome. So look, I'm deeply disappointed. It's like most Democrats, I was really excited at the idea of a California Democrat in the White House. Not only a California Democrat, somebody who understands the Bay Area and all of the challenges that we have in the San Francisco Bay Area, somebody that we in the Democratic caucus could partner with when it comes to public policy. Unfortunately, that is not going to happen. So very, very disappointed. And certainly immigration issues came into play. Donald Trump built something of a multi-racial coalition, sort of eroding some of the groups that historically, working class groups and others, that Democrats were able to sort of count on election day. There was erosion there. So that has really forced the Democratic Party to look at the messages that we're sending more broadly to the electorate, just the kinds of messaging that we do that we think should resonate, but it clearly was not getting through to the level we need. Politics is the art of the possible, and elections matter. We have to win the presidency. I think in 2 years, it's possible we win the House if you look at sort of the history of midterm elections. So that, we have to sort of learn from what went wrong. And I have to tell you, there is an ongoing process internally in the Democratic caucus just to talk through these issues, how we, translate the policy focus into politics and into communications and into messaging. Because if you look at the issues, the public is with us on where Democrats stand on, making the rich pay their fair share, on, the whole range of issues helping the working class and middle class when it comes to, the child care, tax credits, kitchen table issues, protecting affordable health care, kitchen table concerns. Democratic policies are there, and the public agrees with us, but it doesn't show up on election day, and that is a problem with our messaging and how we get through to people, and the kinds of messengers that we are putting forward to, so we can resonate with people who are infrequent voters, and that's who comes out in these presidential elections. Right? President Trump was really able to appeal to infrequent voters. I think Democrats really sort of appeal to the regular voters, and you'll see that in the midterm probably. But we have to be able to win a national election in a presidential cycle, and not only speak to the coasts, but to speak to the broad swath of America in the middle that maybe don't trust the Democratic Party like they should, given the set of policies that we advocate. So I don't want to suggest for a second we're ignoring it. You got to take the loss. You got to look hard at it. I also, though, have to say, and I'll let you guys jump in here. You got me going. I also don't want to overinterpret the results, right? Like, this is a 1.7% loss in terms of the national popular vote. So it's being framed, when you look at the Electoral College, like this was a strong win for Donald Trump. And in all 50 states, there was movement to the right. Okay, not ignoring it. But I don't want to suggest that this was a landslide of epic proportions. It really is going to turn out to be a relatively narrow victory, where the swing states swung for Trump. And we lost the national vote by less than 2%. Not ignoring it, not pretending it didn't happen. I just don't want us to be over-interpreting the results and fighting the last election in the upcoming election, right? We're never going to be running against Donald Trump again, I hope.
You talk about policy versus politics, and politics may be the art of the possible, but it's also the business of perception. The conventional wisdom among some analysts, and of course, conventional wisdom is often neither, is that the party was perceived as too far to the left. And I keep coming back to a particular ad that Trump ran during the World Series. It showed Kamala Harris in an interview saying, yes, state prisoners should be allowed to have state-funded transitional surgery. But what really struck me about that ad was the closing line. She cares about they and them. We care about you. So how much of that is that the party either went too far to the left or was perceived, at least, as being too far to the left?
I mean, I think that there may be that perception. The America First slogan that the President Trump put forth, I think does resonate with people. The sense, that he stands for regular people. The Democrats are sort of out there. I don't know that the Democrats at the national level, I never really saw a counter to that ad. And I think it really had more to do with a sort of a broader set of issues than just transgender rights and pronouns, I mean, that is an issue out there in, transgenders participation in sports, is an issue that people are talking about. But that issue, I think, was really more to try to draw a contrast, and certainly in a negative way, that Democrats are sort of focused on a range of other issues that aren't central to your concerns. And America First, was a slogan that I think did resonate on some level. So I think we need to be mindful of that. I really do believe we are right on the policies. And I think there's going to be a real review on how do we connect with everyday Americans who maybe aren't focused too much on social issues. They're focused more on sort of day-to-day concerns, where sort of the priorities come into play among the parties. A lot of this comes down to your pocketbook and basic day-to-day economic concerns. And I really think we need to be focused like a laser on that. What's really interesting about that issue around surgeries for prisoners, I mean, that is a policy in place with the Trump administration. That policy was put into place by the prior administration. But again, I think that tried to say something larger, and there was also sort of an immigration undercurrent to that advertisement as well, kind of the us versus them. But for all of the talk about America First being a unifying force, that is as divisive and a wedge approach as you can get. And unfortunately, it was effective. And we have to look at all of these things in terms of the kinds of messages that we're sending broadly on a national scale.
Was it a mistake for Kamala Harris to call Donald Trump a fascist?
Oh, she responded to a question if she thought he was a fascist. She said yes.
Yes, he's a fascist.
Calling Donald Trump a fascist, that was not a central part of the campaign. I think she was genuinely, and many of us are genuinely concerned when you have a president who, in many respects, ignores the Constitution, ignores the rule of law. I have no doubt he aspires to be an authoritarian figure. He admires folks like Vladimir Putin. So I think she was speaking to how he sees himself, really. Now, in retrospect, I don't think any of that rhetoric landed in any way. I mean, I saw some, and this is anecdotal, but one of the focus group practitioners talked about how they were asking the question of the focus group, if you think Donald Trump is an authoritarian, and the response was, what is an authoritarian? So we speak in these terms that I don't know, everyday Americans think too much about. They're really focused on their concerns and their day-to-day needs, as they should be. And I just think we need to be able to speak in language that regular folks hear and understand and get and resonate. Labels, I don't think really mean much anymore. So that's something we need to be thinking about when we try to frame an issue or frame a message and sort of put labels on it. I just think we need to speak in terms that regular people understand. And I put myself in this category too. As a Democrat, we need to sort of be more clear with how we convey where we stand, who we are prioritizing, what issues we stand for, and just make it very clear that we're on the side of working people and rebuilding the middle class and jobs and economic concerns, day-to-day concerns for people. So we all have to look inward, myself included, about how we win elections going forward.
One of the things that struck me is counties along the southern border in Texas that normally vote Democratic overwhelmingly voted for Trump. Imperial Valley here in California, which has been another Democratic county, Trump actually won that county. He got 45%, according to the exit polls, of Latino vote. That seems to be a problem. Do Democrats really think there's a problem with the border? What's your take on that?
I think there's no question that there's a problem at the border. There has been chaos at the border. There's been not enough resources for asylum judges. There's a sense that people have that there is disorder. We need to have a border. It needs to be a secure border. There needs to be a coherent process whereby the immigration system operates. Keep in mind, there was comprehensive bipartisan immigration reform, and Trump wanted the issue. He didn't want to solve the problem. He certainly didn't want Joe Biden to get credit for solving a problem. The Biden-Harris administration getting credit for solving a problem. So he pushed on the folks on the right on Capitol Hill to kill the bipartisan immigration reform, which would have helped solve this issue. He wanted the political issue. He didn't want it necessarily solved. Now we'll see what he does going forward. You have a House, a Senate, and a presidency under one-party control. We shall see what their plan is. And I just have always thought this issue should be bipartisan in terms of the solutions. It's too important to get this right. Now, there's a basic economic consideration that immigrants who are currently working, I think, are concerned about threats to their own job security with sort of a chaotic immigration system. So there's some really basic economic considerations. But just on the politics, Democrats have to appeal to Latino voters across this country, not just in border states. This is a growing share of the electorate. We certainly see that in California. We need to be able to convey to Latino voters and voters that maybe historically, traditionally voted a Democrat, that voted Republican in this election, that we are the party that is better aligned with their day-to-day concerns, economic and otherwise. So nobody's going to sit here and say that that wasn't a problem. It's a glaring problem. I was just hoping to no avail that we could take some of the politics out of that, because from a business and an agricultural standpoint, a labor force standpoint, we need a coherent immigration system. We run on immigrant labor. Our economy runs on immigrant labor. So the thought that Donald Trump is going to somehow unleash mass deportations, and remember, he ran on this issue as a centerpiece. Think of the economic dislocation, think of the humanitarian side of this, but also think of just the basic economic labor business considerations of removing immigrant labor from our economy. I just don't think it's realistic, right? Now, we'll see what he does. I know efforts are going to be made in California and other places to protect and do whatever we can to blunt what is going to be pushed if it's a draconian policy. But I fail to see the wisdom in, just politically for the president to push this. I just don't think the rhetoric is going to match the reality when it comes to his immigration policy, which is not to downplay the threats there. I just think there's a basic economic consideration he's going to have to think about as he pursues an immigration policy. But we'll see what happens in the Congress. We have voted repeatedly in the House Democratic Caucus against draconian policies that would bring about families being ripped apart, and just a policy that in no way was humane or thoughtful. So this is about a balancing act, getting a policy right. And it is an enormously complicated issue that unfortunately requires a pretty comprehensive, complicated, bipartisan legislative fix. And that's not where the president's head is at.
Let me ask you. Yeah, let me ask you. Go ahead. Oh, a follow-up question to that. California jails in counties up and down the state have a lot of convicted criminal, illegal migrants. State prison has a lot. Should those people be deported?
I think you're going to have suggestions made by the incoming president that those are the folks that would be focused on first. But remember, the president talked about mass deportations.
Right.
Okay. Without making distinctions around criminality, the president was talking about mass deportations. I do have serious concerns about individuals who are undocumented coming into this country and committing crimes. Absolutely, I'm concerned about that. If individuals are here who are law-abiding, who are part of the labor force, who are contributing to this economy, and this is an American economy that runs on immigrant labor and historically always has. There needs to be a pathway of earned citizenship for those law-abiding, hardworking individuals who make our economy go, and that includes protections for the dreamers, the DACA folks, and those who have there has to be a pathway on earned citizenship for large swaths of individuals. You're talking about a relatively narrow slice of individuals who commit crimes, and I, of course, am concerned about those individuals who are undocumented that commit crimes on the streets. But again, there have been some very high-profile examples of that, but you're talking about a narrow slice of individuals in this country who are undocumented.
Kevin, everyone runs for office with a list of things they want to do once they're in. Nobody runs thinking, I'm going to spend my next 2 years stopping other people from doing things. But how much of your job is now going to be about how do we stop things that you would regard as radical steps by the Trump administration, by a Republican majority, slim as it is? What is your job? What's your job going to be like now? I mean, basically, is it going to be, no, we're going to try to see how we can stop them from doing some of these things?
Yeah, and we've talked a little bit about this. That has been the biggest adjustment for me as a freshman Congress member, is the framing that I was used to in Sacramento, being in a supermajority in the leadership, actually moving public policy on a regular basis, and being influential in the budget discussion, for example, knowing that you are helping craft public policy for 40 million plus Californians. This has been obviously a very different orientation, and candidly, even with a Democratic president and President Biden, who had an extraordinarily productive first couple of years in his term, but under Republican control in the House, unfortunately, much of my job has consisted of giving voice to concerns about Republican policies moving through the House at the committee level and Natural Resources Committee in particular, where it's the drill baby drill caucus really running the Natural Resources Committee, and I'm all for domestic energy production, but you can really see the differences there between the parties and philosophy when it comes to clean energy and those kinds of things. But going to the floor, much of my job has been voting no and working in a unified Democratic caucus to stand up and give voice in opposition to what were really a number of symbolic things. I mean, I have to say, my first term here, I'm now sort of able to look back on that. There was a lot of time and energy, unfortunately, on issues that were symbolic in nature by the Republican caucus, sort of driven by extreme elements of the Republican caucus, because Mike Johnson wanted to keep his speakership, and unfortunately, some of the Freedom Caucus members, some of the more extreme members, were able to move things through that under maybe different circumstances would never even see the light of day. A lot of social issues, symbolic stuff that they knew was not going anywhere once it went over to the Democratic Senate. It was going to basically be killed, or President Biden would veto. We're now entering a very different situation, one that I haven't had any experience with, being in the minority party with a Republican Senate and a Republican president. I will be talking to my mentor, Jackie Spear, about ways to be effective in that scenario. I know that she served for a while with a Republican president and a Republican House. How do you, as a member of the minority party, you've got to be creative. You've got to look for ways to be bipartisan. You know, I don't want to go back there, take that weekly flight across the country just to push the red button and vote no on everything, right? There's got to be some space where we can work in a bipartisan way and depoliticize some issues. But it is going to be a really, I think, a difficult 2 years where we are really focused on protecting California's interests. I mean, that is sort of an undercurrent here. We met with the governor, who came to talk to our House Democratic caucus from California, talking about waivers through the EPA for clean air regulations. So the whole panoply of issues that we in California have led on that will now be under threat from the incoming president. So we've got to hang together. We have, I'll be seeking the counsel of folks like Jackie and Anna Eshoo, who is leaving the House. Also, my wonderful colleague from San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi, who we just celebrated this morning. The newish federal building in San Francisco will be named in her honor. But she's got 37 years of experience and has seen it all. I'm relying on folks like that who can share with me how to be most effective when you don't have any of the levers directly of power. You have to look for areas of influence, ways to influence the process without control of the gavel. And that is a different kind of lawmaking. But look, when you step back from all of it, the dysfunction in Washington is not serving the American people. We have to rebuild the politics of the common good. I don't want to get too high on my soapbox here. I've seen enough to know that partisan warfare is not in service of the American people. We've got to bring some balance in a couple of years and take back the House. I think America works best when there is some balance in the political equation. A pendulum will swing back. There will be a rebalancing. I think that's almost it's probably almost assured. Although I have to say, after this last election, I'm not gonna make any predictions. My prognostication abilities continue to be challenged with actual election results. But I think if you look at history, we'll get some power back in a couple of years. And I think that will be a good thing as a check on the more extreme elements that President Trump was for through his Republican House, who really, I think, will be doing the bidding of the president on a whole range of issues.
As you look to the next session of Congress, what are some of your legislative priorities? Are there particular things that may impact the district here in San Mateo County?
Yeah, so one of the, on the silver linings page, even in the minority party, you're able to bring home earmarks. I don't think earmarks is a dirty word. Money that's secured through the appropriations process for infrastructure projects in my district. So even as a freshman, I was able to bring home $14 million, roughly $14 to $15 million annually. We're going to be going through another process, and that's not a lot of money, but it's helps plug the gap on a number of local infrastructure projects that are, for the most part, shovel ready, that need a little bit of federal help. So that will always be a focus. We are a donor county. We're a donor state. We send more tax money to Washington than we get back. That's always going to be a priority of mine in terms of bringing dollars home and the amount of staff time we put into that. Just from this is a little bit inside baseball, but it really does matter to my district. I'm hoping to be appointed to the Energy and Commerce Committee. It would have been a little easier to achieve that had we gained the majority and gotten more seats on the Energy and Commerce Committee. But my wonderful colleague to the south, Anna Eshoo, has spent decades on the Energy and Commerce Committee in a real leadership position over the Health Subcommittee on that entity. And that Energy and Commerce Committee has broad jurisdiction over the American economy. It is a powerhouse committee. We have lost some members from Northern California. I want to be one of the new members appointed to that committee. We have to have somebody from the San Francisco Bay Area on that committee, given that we're the epicenter of tech, we're the epicenter of life sciences, we are the epicenter of the innovation economy. Our Bay Area economy is crucial to the national economy, and a number of policies, clean energy policies, consumer policies, things that affect tech and life sciences and drug pricing, a whole panoply of issues that committee touches. I want to be appointed to that committee. If it doesn't happen this time, I think it'll happen in a couple of years, but I'm going to remain hopeful. So that really is the focus, and you have to run a campaign to do that. You have to get the support of your region, and then it sort of matriculates up to something called the Steering and Policy Committee. It's kind of like the executive board of the House Democratic Caucus. Ultimately, our leader, Hakeem Jeffries, will make that appointment. So stay tuned on that. And then I've got a number of bills that I'm working on. The Poverty Line Act, modernizing the way we do, the way we establish the poverty line. It affects federal funding across a panoply of programs. It doesn't properly take into account current household costs like housing and healthcare and childcare. So that is crying out for modernization. And I want that to be bipartisan. I think it should be. It probably will have to be in order to see progress in this upcoming term. And then clean energy issues, hoping we can depoliticize when it comes to climate change. I've got a weatherization, regionalization program that is going to be looking at lower income households, how they are preparing for all of that is all that's going to happen when it comes to climate change. How do we make households more resilient? And we see extreme weather all over the place, but we're very much on the front line of climate change here in San Mateo County with the bayfront and the ocean when it comes to sea level rise, but just the extreme weather events that we're seeing, floods, fires, tornadoes, hurricanes, red states, blue states, it doesn't matter. We have to get this country ready for what is to come with a changing climate. So I'm going to try to work across the aisle on that, and a whole range of other issues. I won't bore you with the legislative agenda, but part of this job is going to be figuring out how in the minority party to continue to be effective on behalf of my district, and then also work on the political side to make sure we can take the majority back and bring some balance to the equation in terms of the national power balance when it comes to politics and policy in Washington, D.C.
Let's talk a little bit about local politics. I know you're an acute observer as well of what goes on in San Mateo County at the local level, having risen up through it throughout your career. What's your takeaway from how ballots were cast, how San Mateo County residents, it looks as though a number of progressives, hardline progressives, lost re-election, didn't win. Did you see in any way a parallel between some of the shifts nationally that might also have occurred here in San Mateo County?
It's a great question, Mark. And I don't know that there's a direct line to what some of the national trends were, how it played out locally. And by the way, sorry that email alert keeps going off. I'm sure Frank and the production crew is driving me crazy with that. So I'll take that for the next if I can ever figure out how to turn it. So in terms of the local results, I think there was nothing too surprising. Very candidly, I know that we had an incumbent lose in Redwood City. I think it was by 13 votes on the last count that I saw, and that kind of a loss will make an incumbent pull their hair out. You know, if I walk to a few more streets, but I was not too familiar with the internal dynamics, and I got to tell you, I'm 30 plus years now following San Mateo County politics. It is harder with district elections to understand, if you're not living in that district, what exactly the dynamics are within a particular district, a subset of a larger city, because there can be all sorts of little nuances. I mean, you're talking like street level, neighborhood level considerations that can affect an election. And I think some of those, politics is local, right? And, here in South San Francisco, I know that we had, in my hometown here, we had a couple of incumbents that challenged, and there was a suggestion that they might be like relatively competitive. Turns out they really weren't competitive at all, that for the most part, people are happy with the incumbents and the progress that they see. But just in my own hometown, I sense the tension around growth, that just the level of growth in our downtown, which I love, by the way, near the Caltrain station there and the Carol Matsumoto Plaza. It's like a model of what the state is encouraging in terms of higher density, market rate, and some below market rate housing, which has revitalized the downtown, utilizing transit. There's a lot of really exciting things happening up and down the peninsula. It maybe doesn't get as much attention as it should, but there's a lot that is going right in our communities. But there is tension around growth, of course, tension around, just the economic prosperity that we are in the midst of here on the San Francisco Peninsula, but the byproducts of all of that economic activity and the job creation. And that gets, right at the core concerns of affordable housing. And, I made the comment about Millbrae earlier. If I could just add to that, you can't complain about homelessness and then also complain when there's a solution on the table that actually helps solve the problem of homelessness. And I know that's just one of those issues that really, was a driver of the recent recall election in Millbrae. And I think I'm disappointed. We have to evolve to a point where we look beyond sort of the rhetoric and focus on, what are some solutions that we can arrive at that are actually addressing problems. And I think, converting hotels that are underutilized, that are, in some cases crime-ridden, and refurbishing them, actually improving those properties, and looking at homelessness in a comprehensive way and getting people back on their feet. And at the core, the main problem with homelessness is the lack of affordable housing. The gold standard studies they say that it's the lack of affordable housing. We should be a leader, and in many cities we are, on that very question. And I want to see what I can do from the federal level to bring resources to bear, to push for tax credit policy that makes affordable housing pencil up for developers. So that is an example of something where the federal government has been pretty AWOL I want to prod and push to see how the federal government can be a better partner for communities like ours in San Mateo County who are doing the right thing, but need some federal resources to help out on the big challenges that we have.
Let's get into one more thing. We've taken up a lot of your time. We really appreciate you spending, especially your time here in the district with us. Gavin Newsom was governor during the bulk of your time in the state assembly. He's going to be leaving office in 2 years. We know there's going to be a very active campaign to replace him. Have you taken a side yet? Have you backed somebody? I imagine you're hearing from lots of people. And who do you think are the leaders that we all as political observers ought to be looking at and anticipating that there'll be major candidacies among them in less than 2 years?
Yeah, great question. They were talking on CNN about how the 2028 election, like, literally starts the day after the 2024 election. The way these things work, right? So, yeah, Gavin Newsom certainly is at the top of everyone's list, just given his national profile, his appearances on Fox, and going to red states with his own super PAC. I think it's called Campaign for Democracy, I believe. So he absolutely has been sort of spreading his wings out there. I'm not convinced that he will be a candidate. I mean, people look at me like, you're crazy, right? Like he's definitely running for president. I just know that, I mean, I don't know this directly. I can project that running for president is just a different animal altogether than even being the governor of the most populous state in America. Just the level of scrutiny that one gets, for all the criticism that he gets and all of the haters on social media and so forth. When you put yourself out on a national scale, it's just, and it's an exponential kind of a thing. And he's going to have to look at, does he want to put his family through that? Any sort of history that he's not proud of gets dredged up. There's just a lot to running for president, but he's an exceptional communicator, right? So if he does announce, I won't be totally shocked. I'm just not personally convinced that he's going to do it. And there's the Kamala question. I take a little bit of credit for saying this a long time ago, that if she were to ever go for the vice presidency and not make it to the top, that she would come home and run for governor of California, do sort of a Richard Nixon.
Slightly different outcome, I'm sure he's hoping for, yeah. But let's talk real quickly then about 26 and who might run to replace Newsom in the governorship. Have you heard from potential candidates? Are you prepared to endorse one already? Make some news here on our show?
Not ready for that one, man. You caught me a little early in that one. I did spend the morning with Eleni Kounalakis, Lieutenant Governor, who I've had some exposure to. I think what is interesting about this one, if we assume for a second that Kamala Harris either runs again for president or leaves politics and doesn't come home to run for governor of California, because, by the way, she would, I would say, probably clear the field. She would do like a little bit of a Jerry Brown on that one, actually, because she's such a prominent name now. There'd be some echoes there of Jerry Brown, who ran for president and then eventually came home. What's unusual, if she stays out, is I don't see a front runner for governor of California. I think it is unusually open, and certainly Eleni Kounalakis as sort of the number two with lots of resources to spend would absolutely be at the top of that list. But California is so vast that it takes so long to get known by the people of California. Fifth largest economy, 40 million people. Fifth largest economy in the world, 40 million people. It just takes decades sometimes to get known. So when you have 7 or 8 people running on the Democratic side, who I would say, are relative unknowns compared to somebody like Kamala Harris, that it's very much wide open. So I've not endorsed anybody. I'm not a candidate. That's it's the only news I've got. I'm not running. I like my job.
Well, listen, Kevin, we always love having you on. It's like a reunion since you and I co-hosted the game for many years. We know how absurdly busy you are, but we sure appreciate you being with us. And we look forward to having you on anytime you want. The door is always open for you. So thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next time, can we talk 49ers and Buster Posey, the Buster Posey regime with the Giants?
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to talk about the Niners, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure there'll be much to talk about by the time we get around. But yes, I'm always happy to talk about the Giants and Buster Posey. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thanks,
Thank
Kevin.
you for coming by the game again. I want to remind you, you can subscribe on any of the social media platforms you use, YouTube, or you can go, as you can see on the screen here, to thegamepeninsula.com, and we'd be happy to have you on. And as always, I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Bob Marks.
And that's the game. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.